Hello, and thank you for joining me as I continue to heal myself from previous experiences and as I continue to learn about myself through these experiences and kind of where I have found the availability and ability to look at myself inward and outward to continue this journey of self healing. And I wanted to talk about three things today, and that's harm reduction, vulnerability, and sexual trauma. All things that I have experienced in my life personally that have caused me to do a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors and to also, live such a limited lifestyle because I was stuck in such a trap type of perspective or way of thinking. And the first thing I'll talk about is sexual trauma. In my experience, back in 2008, I was sexually assaulted, and this experience really took a lot out of me. And for 11 years, I tried to push it away. I tried to not think about it. I tried not to live in that moment because it kept reminding me of this horrible experience that had happened to me, and this experience that not only happened, to me, but it was I was constantly reminded through other experiences that I had of this one experience. So I kept reliving this experience, and that ended up becoming a vicious cycle of harming myself. And when I would harm myself, I would really take everything out of myself or anything I had set up to just try to numb myself from these feelings. And the more I learn about sexual trauma, the more I learn about this post-traumatic stress that comes with it. That comes with that is a lack of emotional availability, self-confidence, destroyed relationships, substance abuse. All these things have come together because of this one experience, and I didn't give it any kind of credit, or I didn't give it any acknowledgement that it happened. So for 11 years, I was just kind of slowly destroying myself. And so I kept harming myself because I felt that's what I deserved, and that all had to do with me not dealing with this or talking about it or even approaching it in a way that I could, heal myself. And so the more I pushed it away, the more I pushed this trauma away, the more I was actually reliving these experiences. And the more I was actually, harming myself. And so for me, that led to this self-sabotaging behaviors that I didn't really recognize because I was in such a vicious cycle of trying to create a reality that didn't really exist. I tried to create this reality that didn't involve these traumas or involve, this thing that happened to me. I tried to push it away. And the more I pushed it away, the more I was actually harming myself. So that leads me into, kind of what happened to me and how did I end up understanding this from a different perspective. And first and foremost was I had to get clear-headed. And I had to go seek professional help because I wasn't able to do it on my own. And that professional help involved me going to therapy twice a week for 5 months where I can address the situation, I could see what I was doing to myself, and I could understand my habits and these things that went along with it. And the more I was able to talk about it, not only to these professionals, but the people in my community, people in my immediate surroundings, people in my inner circle, I could talk about it because for so long I was just trying to push it away. And I felt that the longer I could push it away, maybe I could forget about it. But this trauma was stored in my body, my physiological body. I was trapped because I had let this trauma become something that I didn't really understand. And so, the harm reduction comes into how do I guess, identify these self-sabotaging behaviors, and what do I do to change that? And the first thing I have to do is recognize, what am I doing to harm myself? What am I doing to put myself in a situation that I really don't want to be in? Although I might be there in that moment, it's like that's not really where I want to be. My heart-centered self doesn't want to be in these situations, but I keep putting myself in it. So the harm reduction comes in by identifying what am I doing and how am I putting myself there. Because living in trauma, or living through my trauma, I just kept reliving these moments and these experiences. And I just want to say, I know I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this, because the more I talk about it, the more I set myself free. The more I talk about it, the more I see people around me who have experienced something very similar. And so the harm reduction comes in like, how do I change these mechanisms, these bad coping mechanisms? Well, I have to first identify them, right? It's like, how do I identify the fact that when I feel numb or when I want to isolate, I go out and get fucked up. I go get drunk. I go smoke methamphetamines. Or I kind of put myself in an even more dangerous situation, Like, part of my story is that although I had this trauma happen to me, I kept reliving it. And when I involved substance, I would want to continue to numb myself. And I've done things against my own will to keep traumatizing myself to get myself these substances, And it didn't just end with that one trauma. What happened was that I had this experience happen, and then I would do things that would end up traumatizing myself even more by putting myself in these situations, Like, one of the most deepest things that I could talk about that I've really harmed myself after that trauma is what I would do to continue to get high. And although I stopped blaming myself, because I did the best I could do in that moment with the tools that I had in that moment, And so learning how to forgive myself and not carry guilt and shame has been a process, and I'm still learning it. But I'm learning that it's okay. I'm learning that my experience in the past, that's just part of me, and I'm bringing that experience in the past with me for right now. Because all these experiences and all these moments have brought me to this one singular point right now. And that's okay. Like, it's totally okay. Like, anything that's ever happened in my past, and as long as I continue to not harm myself right now, it's okay. Because everything already is okay. All these lies that I kept telling myself, those were not real. But, I just had to find out and identify, what am I doing to harm myself? What traumas in my past have happened that I need to identify? So I can start connecting these dots, right? Once I start connecting these dots, I can start to recognize, okay, this is why I reacted the way I did. This is why my response was the way it was. And the more I can start connecting those dots, the more I start to free myself from this suffering, this bondage that I've created in this false reality. And that leads me to being vulnerable, right? The more vulnerable I can be in the moment, to others, to myself, to my surroundings, the more I'm able to set myself free. And the more I can talk about it in social settings, and to talk about and to share my story and not feel guilt or shame, the more I can heal, and the more I can grow, and the more I can kind of take this experience and transform into a positive experience, right? Although something in the past happened that I consider negative, it's like how I in actuality, it's okay. And so I use these words of self-affirmation to tell myself that it is okay. When something comes up that triggers me, where I freeze and I isolate and I don't know what to do, it's like I pause. I pause for that moment, and wherever I'm lacking that love is like where I need to actually fill in, all right? That's where I need to actually identify and say, you know what? It's okay, and you're loved, and you're beautiful no matter what happened. These things might have happened to me, and it was really, traumatizing, and it really hurt me, and I really had these things happen, but, they've built me to become a better person and stronger person emotionally today. And, there's this saying, it's like trauma has no face, right? Trauma happens in so many different ways, right? There's like all these things that have happened, but they all get stored the same way, so not one's better than the other, but, it's like identifying the trauma so I can then understand, how do I reduce the harm to myself? And that happens by me being more vulnerable. And I guess my point of this video is to share a little bit about my story, so I know I'm not alone so I could continue to grow and I could continue to share my story. Because the more I can share my story and be raw and real, the more authentic I can be in the moment to myself. And the more authentic I can be in the moment to myself, the more I can share my gift, which is my expression, with the outside surroundings. You know? And so it's just this continued journey of self-care that I'm learning. And I'm learning, you know, through this process that, you know, how do I heal myself? You know, how do I love myself more? And that's by taking these past experiences and loving them unconditionally. Because the more I can love these experiences and telling myself it's okay, the more I can give myself this love that I deserve. You know? And this is just a little bit of my story. And you know, I just want you to know that if you've had something that's happened to you, you're not alone. You know? You're not alone at all. And it's this crazy cycle that until we can actually see it, then I can start to break myself free, right? I suffer to my own bondage that I create in my own mind. And the more that I can start to release this bondage, the more I stop suffering. And the more I start growing. And so I just wanted to kind of share about this right now and just kind of talk about this, because in my path right now, I'm healing. I'm healing from my wounds that I've created. And the more I'm talking about it, the more I can share. And the more I can keep focusing on myself. And so it just takes one small moment, one breath at a time to heal. It's never going to just be over. I realize that. But it will continue to get better so long as I keep recognizing it and not giving it so much power. You know, not giving my past the power. Not letting it rent that space inside my mind and my heart. You know, the more I can understand, how do I switch, you know, my responses from my fear or fight mode into this relaxed mode? And the more I talk about it, the less triggered I get. The less I feel anxious. The less I want to isolate. You know? And I don't know. I'm learning every day that, you know, I can fall in love with these aspects of myself that I used to hate. And so there is hope, and it takes work, and it takes insight. And for me, there's many different things that I did to help me get myself there, and I'm willing to share about them privately. And don't be afraid to ask me about my journey, because I want to share. I want to talk about my story, you know? I want to be able to share that it is possible to heal. But first, I must understand where it's coming from. And then I must reduce those things that I used to harm myself for. And the more that I put myself out there and be vulnerable, the more I can start to grow, you know? And, you know, that's what I have for now. And this is what I want to talk about. And so feel free to ask me anything, and I will continue to update on my journey. And I love you, and have a beautiful day. I'll see you soon.